Hey everyone, it's Zach with Palantir Research. We've got a new interview with Palantir CEO Alex Karp, as well as with Axel Springer CEO Matthias Döpfner, as well as a new podcast from Business Insider's correspondent called How Palantir Developed a Meme-Crazy Fan Base. This is hosted on Digital Void Podcast. So for the German interview first, and of course, I can't forget to bring up the true star of the show. Some of you really like that moderator or host, but in all seriousness, Karp spoke about how democracy is under threat and the different issues surrounding that. Now, it's a very political discussion in nature. Obviously, it's the best way just to watch the whole thing. But for some quick bullet points here, and I do got to give a quick disclaimer. I know people do get triggered sometimes when Karp's vehemently against the far right, but you got to remember the context here, especially when it's in Europe. He's not talking about traditional conservatives or Republicans if you're American. In this context, it's literally the extremist political party associated with neo-Nazism in Europe that prioritizes xenophobia and even the deportation of asylum seekers, non-native legal residents, and even non-assimilated but legal citizens of countries. So yes, in my book, the far right is problematic in that respect. So they're not talking about the people trying to have lower taxes in case you get triggered. But either way, they discuss a lot of the effects of the Israel-Hamas conflict out in Germany and the United States, as well as the political situations and their similarities and also differences, and as well as the cultural drivers for this as well. So one interesting part that Karp noted was if the United States had their election today, Trump would win very easily. And that's not his political party too. So he does really understand the current state of the Democrats and progressives in the US as a very weak position. And I don't think anyone would be surprised at this opinion right now, regardless of your personal politics. But they also talk about the state of artificial intelligence and how this will affect governments and militaries, as well as these discussions they've got to bring up China and how the West will contend with them. Now, for internal surveillance, of course, no surprise here, Palantir and Karp are vehemently against it, and they want to keep civil liberties secure. But they do believe the West can prevail with, of course, some investment for peer-to-peer AI, and even become strong enough to actually deter our adversaries in the future. But this depends on government prioritization as well as that spending he brought up, and points out his efforts here domestically to increase the United States. But either way, check out the full interview if you want every single detail. Now, on the Digital Void podcast, they had Katie Natopoulos from Business Insider there. She actually wrote that article last year on Fast Money, which was kind of meh in my opinion. But for the podcast, I'd say it's actually an all right piece here, and they go over the whole meme community, and she doesn't necessarily paint the Palantir community in a negative light, but does point out a lot of different facets of the community from those who actually follow the company and their financials, not just the memes, but for the real financial health of the company there and actually analyzing it. But still brings up also the oddity and the dedication of all the YouTube channels or daily vlogs, live streams, X threads, and even Discords there. So a lot of you on the channel know these different social media accounts, really following Palantir here, and of course are an audience yourself. So they do also talk about Alex Karp, and they don't paint him necessarily in a negative light, surprisingly, but definitely note how he is very different from a traditional CEO, as well as the encouragement of retail investors by management. So funnily, she does reference the bear cave too, making note this is a red flag, especially with putting so many press releases. Now, I'll leave it up to you if you think that's a negative because they're talking so much to retail investors, but I don't think that at all. It helps every investor there get more info, not just the big institutions on the inside. And I like how they say Palantir is kind of a contradiction to a real meme stock, so they do acknowledge this here, literally saying the phrase is meant for actual dog shit companies, especially in the financials. But obviously we know Palantir is not in the same boat there. But they do also talk about how they really don't understand the company still, and points out how the community invests the time to actually figure it out, and notes how it can be rewarding to be ahead of the curve, or at least think you are. But the realities of the risk are still pointed out, so that's fair. So I think overall it's a pretty good piece in describing Palantir, and if it's the first time hearing about this without that article from before, then I think it's a good job describing the whole meme or not meme company aspect of Palantir, as well as the community and social following around it. So it's obvious she can't know every single intricacy, and I don't expect her to when it comes to Palantir, so you can't knock her for it, and really does hope things work out for folks. But it's important to be realistic that the risks are there, and I think a lot of people in the Palantir community actually do understand this, with earnings coming up especially, that they still have to prove themselves on the record financially, not in just what they say they're doing. But thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.